In a quiet town where the law is absolute, one man stood above it all, a sheriff, respected, feared, untouchable. But behind closed doors, beneath the badge and the authority, lay a secret, a betrayal, an affair that would shake the very foundations of trust, a brother, a wife, and a man who believed he was beyond justice. For years he buried the whispers, silenced the rumors, and erased the truth. Reports vanished, witnesses fell silent. The system, the very one he swore to uphold, became his shield. But secrets, like cracks in stone, only deepen with time. And when the moment came, when the veil of deception was finally torn away, he would find himself not as the law, but as the suspect. This is the story of a sheriff who refused to investigate his own crimes until the evidence was undeniable, until the truth was staring him in the face, until the moment he was caught, red-handed. His name is Sheriff William Tate, a man of firm handshake and measured words. His presence alone is enough to command respect. For over 20 years he has worn the badge, standing tall in the center of town affairs. His word to many is final, his reputation unquestionable. From the old diner at the corner of Main Street to the church pews where families gather every Sunday, William Tate is a name spoken with reverence. He is the man who put away local drunks when they caused trouble, the man who settled disputes before they ever reached a courtroom, the one parents trusted to keep their children safe. A sheriff in title, but more than that, he is the town's quiet ruler. It is not power in the way of kings or politicians. No, his control is more subtle, more complete. It is the kind of power that comes from time, familiarity, and unchallenged authority. A word from him, and an officer knew when to look away. A nod, and a complaint could disappear. No one questions the sheriff. No one dares. He is not a cruel man, nor an overtly corrupt one, but his hands hold more than just the law. They hold secrets. Sheriff Tate's family mirrors the respect he commands. His brother Michael Tate is a man cut from a softer cloth. Younger by 6 years, Michael is not built for law enforcement or command. Instead, he is a man of quiet ambition, one who finds comfort in routine, in the certainty of a steady job at the local hardware store, in the warmth of his home at the end of a long day. His wife, Eleanor Tate, is the woman every neighbor admires. Graceful, soft-spoken, known for her kindness and unwavering presence at every town fundraiser. To all who see them, Michael and Eleanor are a picture of stability, a family built on trust. They share a home just a short walk from the sheriff's own, separated by no more than a few blocks. Sundays are spent together, meals shared, laughter exchanged. In a town where everyone knows everyone, their bond is a known fact, a certainty. Michael has never once questioned his brother, never had a reason to. But certainty, like glass, only holds as long as there are no cracks. The town itself is small, a place where the wind carries the sound of footsteps down narrow streets, where the post office is also a convenience store, and the diner's morning crowd is made up of the same men who sat there the day before. It is a town where memories linger longer than footprints, where the past is always within reach. It is also a town where whispers travel faster than the law. Nothing truly remains hidden here, and yet some things are only seen by those who choose to look. Sheriff William Tate has always been careful, his movements calculated, his public image pristine, his interactions with Eleanor harmless, measured. A glance across a dinner table, a touch that lingers half a second too long, unnoticed by some, unquestioned by others. If there are suspicions, they remain unspoken. After all, who would dare accuse the sheriff? His brother trusts him, the town respects him, his own deputies owe him. But trust is a fragile thing, and respect is not the same as loyalty. For years, there is nothing more than quiet moments between them, nothing that could be proven, nothing that would be called improper, until it is. It starts as all things do, small, imperceptible. A reason to stay late at the station, a late-night drive that finds its way to the same street, a meeting at the edge of town where eyes cannot follow. There is no need for deception when one controls what is seen, no reason to fear exposure when one decides what is reported. But in a town where nothing stays buried, even the most powerful man is not beyond suspicion. A neighbor notices a car that does not belong. A waitress at the diner recalls seeing them together once too often. A single misplaced comment, a single stray look, and suddenly the sheriff's name is spoken in a different way, not with reverence, not with admiration, but with doubt. Michael Tate is not a man who seeks confrontation, but he is a man who listens. And when enough voices whisper the same thing, it becomes impossible to ignore. He watches, though he does not want to. He listens, though he wishes he did not. And soon, the puzzle pieces begin to fit together. Eleanor's absences, his brother's late nights, the moments that once seemed meaningless now form a picture too clear to deny. Michael does not want to believe it. Does not want to think that the man who once carried him on his shoulders as a boy, the man who has stood beside him through every chapter of his life, could betray him in the way only a brother can. And yet, the truth does not wait for belief. It does not ask for permission. It simply is. The moment comes when he can no longer pretend not to know. He does what any man in his place would do. He seeks justice, not in the way his brother does, not through influence or silence. Michael goes to the only place he believes is above corruption, the sheriff's office. A report is filed, a statement is made, an accusation, clear, direct, one that cannot be ignored. But in a town where the law answers to a single man, justice is not a guarantee. The complaint never reaches the hands it should. The case never sees the inside of a courtroom. Instead, it finds its way back to the sheriff's desk, the same desk where evidence has disappeared before. The same desk where decisions are made, not by the law, but by the man who holds it. And with the stroke of a pen, the report is gone. The accusation is erased, as if it had never been spoken at all. The town remains quiet. The whispers subside. Sheriff William Tate remains untouchable, for now. But the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its way to the surface. And soon, even the sheriff will learn that power has its limits. It begins as all things do, quietly. A moment too brief to question, a gesture too small to matter. Sheriff William Tate has always been a man of discipline, his habits unchanging, his movements methodical. To the people of the town, he is a fixture, constant, immovable. But habits are only predictable until they change. And change, however slow, does not escape the eyes of those who have learned to watch. It begins with late nights. The sheriff has always worked late, his office often the last to go dark. But now the nights stretch longer, calls unanswered, meetings unexplained. He is seen once parked on an empty road, his headlights off, the night swallowing him whole. A moment later, another car arrives, its engine cutting to silence as it pulls alongside his. No one pays attention, not then. It is a town where late-night patrols are routine. A sheriff's work is never done. But it is not the only time. A week later, the same road. A month after that, another meeting, this time just beyond the town limits, where the trees grow thick and the roads are seldom traveled. No reports are filed on these nights. No official calls are made. And when he returns, there is something different about him. His tone, measured yet distant. His presence, there yet removed. A man who has spent years watching others now turns his gaze inward, more aware of himself, more careful in the spaces he occupies. But even caution, when overused, leaves a trail. And it is not only the sheriff who begins to change. Eleanor Tate, once unwavering in her routine, is now absent from the places she once frequented. The bakery where she picked up fresh bread each morning, now visited only on occasion. The church pew where she once sat beside her husband, her hands folded neatly in her lap, now left vacant without explanation. She smiles when spoken to, but the warmth does not reach her eyes. Her presence feels borrowed, as though her mind is elsewhere, caught in moments no one else can see. Those who know her well do not press, some do not notice. But Michael does. For a man who has never once questioned his wife, Michael Tate now finds himself watching her in ways he never did before. A missing hour, a conversation cut short as he enters the room, a phone that never leaves her side. He is not a man who jumps to conclusions, nor one to chase ghosts where none exist. But ghosts do not leave traces, and Eleanor does. A coat hung by the door, still carrying the scent of night air, though she was never meant to leave. A text message that vanishes before he can read it. A hesitation when he reaches for her hand. For the first time in his marriage, Michael feels a distance that cannot be crossed, a silence that cannot be filled. And the moment he begins to see it, he cannot unsee it. Others begin to notice, though few speak of it. At the diner, where Eleanor once lingered over coffee with friends, she now stays only long enough to be polite. A close friend, Margaret Hilda, remarks on her absence, her voice light, though her eyes are knowing. "She's been different lately," she says once in passing, her words reaching Michael in the way small observations do, simple yet weighted. He brushes it aside, though it lingers in his mind, settles somewhere deep. A week later, another comment, this time from an old acquaintance at the hardware store. "Didn't see Eleanor at the market this morning," the man notes casually. "She always goes on Thursdays." Michael forces a smile. "Maybe she went later." The man only nods, but the look he gives is one of recognition, a look that says he too has noticed. It is small, meaningless on its own, but now everything feels connected. And then the calls begin. Anonymous at first, a quiet breath on the other end of the line, a hesitation before the click of disconnection. Then a voice, shaky, uncertain. "You need to look closer." Michael does not recognize it. A woman, someone who does not wish to be known. He does not respond, but the words do not leave him. The next day, another call, a different voice, this time a man's. "I saw them," the voice says, low and hurried. "Out near the old service road. You need to look closer." The line goes dead before he can ask anything more. He does not want to believe it. But belief is no longer something he can afford. Michael Tate makes a decision. He walks into the sheriff's office, the same place he has walked into 100 times before. He waits outside William's door, the weight of what he is about to say pressing into his chest. And then he knocks. The sheriff looks up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Michael," he says, his voice the same as it has always been, steady, certain. "What brings you in?" Michael closes the door behind him. "I need to file a report." William leans back in his chair, his eyes sharp, but his face betrays nothing. "What kind of report?" Michael hesitates only a moment. "An investigation." William does not blink. "Into what?" A pause. "My wife," Michael says, the words hollow, heavy. "And you." For the first time, the sheriff does not have an immediate answer. The silence between them stretches too long, and then, slowly, deliberately, William Tate sets his pen down. There is no denial, no anger, just a long, measured breath, and a single response. There's nothing to investigate. A pause. Then softer, but absolute. This doesn't go any further. Michael Tate does not remember leaving the office, does not recall walking back home, or the way the air feels colder against his skin. All he knows is that his worst fear has just been confirmed. And that, in this town, justice is only an option if the sheriff allows it. But for the first time in his life, Michael is no longer willing to accept that. A report may have been erased, a conversation silenced, but the truth does not vanish. And the sheriff, despite all his power, does not yet realize his time is running out. A complaint is filed. It is a simple process, one that has played out many times before. A form, a statement, a record placed into the system. It should be routine. But in this town, where the law bends to the will of a single man, some complaints never see the light of day. The file is placed on a desk, its weight no greater than a handful of pages, but the name written across it carries the burden of consequence. Sheriff William Tate. An accusation, direct and clear. A breach of trust that cannot be ignored. A demand for investigation. And yet, it vanishes. At the town hall, where records are kept, there is no trace of it, no reference number, no official note of submission. At the sheriff's office, where complaints are logged, it is absent from the system. It is as though it was never written at all. Michael Tate returns to inquire, his voice steady, his face set with determination. "I filed a report," he says, standing in front of the duty officer's desk. "Over a week ago." The officer, Deputy Raymond Clark, hesitates only slightly before responding. "We don't have any record of that." Michael does not move. His jaw tightens, but his voice does not waver. "I filed it myself." The deputy shifts in his chair. He does not meet Michael's gaze. "I'm sorry. There's nothing here." Michael exhales, slow and measured. "Then I'll file it again." This time he makes copies. This time he does not trust the process to work on its own. But still, the report never moves forward. It is a system designed to protect its own. A system that has long learned how to silence the unwanted. And in this case, the unwanted truth is one that Sheriff William Tate has no intention of allowing into the light. The town, though small, is not without its quiet observers. For years, the sheriff's word has been final, but now that certainty is shifting. At the bar, where voices carry in low murmurs, there is talk of complaints that have disappeared. At the general store, where conversations slip between shelves, there are whispers of something being buried. Margaret Hilda, a woman who has seen more in this town than most, leans across the counter one afternoon, her voice just above a whisper. "I heard Michael tried to report something," she says. Across from her, Frank Davies, a man who has lived in this town as long as he can remember. "He's been asking questions," he says, "not getting answers." Margaret exhales through her nose. William's shutting it down. A silence lingers between them. And then Frank, shaking his head, mutters under his breath, "He's done it before." A name begins to surface. A deputy, low in rank, quiet in demeanor. Officer Daniel Mercer, a man young enough to still believe in the law, but old enough to recognize when it is being twisted. He has seen the paperwork, seen the complaints that never reach the books. He has watched helpless as calls from the wrong people are simply forgotten. But this time it is different. This time the person being silenced is Michael Tate, the sheriff's own brother. Mercer, despite his place in the hierarchy, makes a decision. He takes a copy of the report, not from the official records, but from where it has been discarded. He keeps it somewhere safe. He waits. And then one evening, as the sun dips behind the horizon, he does something no one else has dared to do. He hands it to someone outside the station, not a superior, not an investigator, but a journalist. The story does not break immediately. Information must be gathered, sources verified. The town, though small, is still a place where caution is necessary. But people begin to talk. They speak in quiet conversations, in hurried exchanges. The sheriff's absence from the diner on mornings he never used to miss. Eleanor's hesitance, the way she seems to avoid places she once frequented. And Michael, his face worn, his movements careful, as though waiting for something that will not come. More names begin to surface. A clerk at the county office who recalls seeing a file that should not have gone missing. A dispatcher who remembers a call being rerouted without explanation. A neighbor who weeks earlier had seen a car parked where it should not have been. The fragments of a story, scattered, but for the first time they are being collected. And though William Tate does not know it yet, the silence he has so carefully maintained is beginning to slip from his grasp. At the sheriff's office, the tension is unspoken but heavy. Deputies move with the same precision, the same routine. But there are glances. There is awareness. A sense that something has shifted, that something once unquestioned is now being questioned. And the sheriff himself, he does not address it. He does not acknowledge the growing unease. He does not need to, because in his mind there is nothing to investigate, because in this town there is no case unless he allows it to be one. And he has decided this will not be one. The people do not push, not yet. The whispers remain just that, whispers. But within them, there is something unspoken but certain. A realization that is beginning to take hold, that the law is not being upheld, that the man they have trusted for so long is not looking for justice but avoiding it, that their sheriff, for all his power, is protecting himself. For now, it is still quiet. For now, William Tate still believes that nothing will come of it. But truth does not vanish. Evidence does not disappear forever. And a town that has turned its head away for years is now starting to look back. The investigation may not exist in the eyes of the law, but beyond the walls of the sheriff's office, it has already begun. There is a moment in every deception when control begins to slip, a crack so small it seems meaningless, a single misstep that, at first, goes unnoticed. But when power is built on illusion, even the smallest fracture is enough to bring everything down. Sheriff William Tate has spent years shaping the rules of this town, bending them to fit his will. His word has held the weight of law, his authority unquestioned, until now, until one mistake changes everything. It begins with a hidden camera, a simple device purchased in cash from a store outside town, small, discreet, placed where no one would think to look. Michael does not install it alone. He enlists the help of Daniel Mercer, the young officer who has already risked his career once. Together they find the right place, a motel on the outskirts, far from town, but not far enough to escape suspicion. A place where a car parked too long would be noticed, but only by those who knew what to look for. Mercer plants the camera, a single lens, facing a single door. And then they wait. For 2 nights, there is nothing. Then on the third, the car arrives. William Tate does not move like a man who believes he is being watched. He walks with the confidence of someone who has done this before, who has never once feared the consequences of his actions. And he is not alone. The footage is not perfect. The angle is narrow, the lighting poor. But there is no mistaking the figures caught within its frame. Sheriff William Tate and Eleanor Tate, together. It is no longer rumor, no longer whispers behind closed doors. It is fact. Michael watches the footage in silence. He does not move, he does not speak. For a moment there is nothing but the soft hum of the playback, the grainy image flickering before him. Then he exhales, once, deeply. There is no more uncertainty, now he knows. And now it is time for the truth to be known. The confrontation is not private. It does not happen behind closed doors, where voices can be lowered and tempers controlled. It happens in front of the entire town. A Sunday morning, just outside the church, where families gather in their best clothes, exchanging greetings and smiles. Michael waits. He stands just beyond the steps where the sheriff will pass, where he cannot be ignored. And when William Tate emerges, his hand still mid-shake with another, his voice caught in the middle of a greeting, Michael steps forward, and he speaks. "Where were you last night?" The words are clear, loud enough for those around them to hear. William freezes. There is a flicker, brief, almost imperceptible, a hesitation so slight that most would miss it. But Michael does not. "I asked you a question," he says again. "Where were you?" William straightens. His voice is steady. "I was at home." Michael shakes his head. "Once. No, you weren't." The tension is instant. People stop speaking. Conversations falter. Heads turn. The sheriff's expression does not change, but his hand tightens into a fist. "I don't know what you're trying to say," he replies, his voice slow, controlled. "But I think very carefully before you continue." Michael holds his gaze, and then he reaches into his pocket, a flash drive, held up for all to see. "I have proof," he says. "I have footage." The silence is complete. For the first time in his life, William Tate has no response. There is nothing to deny, nothing to bury. It is too late. The truth is no longer his to control. The town does not erupt, not immediately, but something shifts. A weight that has pressed against these streets for years is suddenly lifting. Conversations, once careful, become open. Rumors, once dismissed, are now spoken as truth. William Tate's name is no longer uttered with respect, but with something else, something far heavier. A deputy resigns the next morning. By nightfall, another follows, and then a witness comes forward, a woman from the records department. She remembers the missing complaint. She remembers who ordered it to be removed, and now she is willing to speak. The sheriff does not leave his house for 2 days. For the first time, he is the one avoiding the town. For the first time, he is the one being watched. And then he makes a mistake. He calls Eleanor, a single phone call, one that should have gone unnoticed. But it is recorded, not by accident, not by chance, but because Michael Tate has already prepared for it. The conversation is brief, a single admission, a single moment of frustration, a demand, stay quiet, and then a name, a man's name, a judge, the one who helped make the complaint disappear. And just like that, the corruption is no longer just rumor, it is fact. By the end of the week, the sheriff's office is no longer his to command. A state investigator arrives. Deputies once loyal no longer stand beside him. His badge, the one that once shielded him from consequences, now holds no weight. And in the center of it all, Michael Tate, the brother he underestimated, the man he believed could be silenced. But Michael has not spoken much. He has not celebrated, nor gloated. He has simply stood and watched. As a man who once ruled this town with quiet certainty, now faces the one thing he cannot erase, the truth. The town watches too. The people who once turned away, who once whispered behind closed doors, now they see. And for the first time in over 20 years, Sheriff William Tate stands alone. A town does not change overnight. It does not wake to a new reality all at once. It shifts, slowly, piece by piece. At first there is only silence. Then in the space where silence once held its grip, there is talk. Not whispered, not hidden, but open. People speak freely now, in the grocery store, at the diner, outside the church. There is no need to lower their voices anymore. The sheriff's power is gone. And in its place, there is something new, accountability. William Tate does not return to his office. He does not stand before the people who once obeyed him. He does not attempt to salvage what remains, because there is nothing left to salvage. His resignation is not voluntary, it is forced. A final act, signed with a hand that once controlled this town, but now shakes beneath its weight. The badge that once gave him protection is no longer his to wear. The office that once shielded him from consequence now belongs to someone else. A younger man, chosen by the state, steps in to replace him. A sheriff not tied to the old ways, one who does not owe William Tate loyalty, one who will not look away. The town watches as it happens, some with satisfaction, some with quiet disbelief, and some with relief, because now at last the law belongs to them again. Michael Tate does not celebrate, he does not gloat, he simply moves forward. For a long time, he did not know if he would ever see justice, but now he has. And yet, justice is not the same as peace. He is still a man betrayed, a man whose trust was broken by the two people who should never have broken it. Eleanor leaves town soon after, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, just as the whispers about her begin to turn into open stares. She packs her things in the middle of the afternoon, when most are at work, when few are there to notice, but there is always someone watching. Someone who sees the way she keeps her head down, the way she does not look back. She does not return. Michael does not ask where she has gone, and the town does not care to find out. The media arrives before the dust has fully settled. They come with cameras, with questions, with microphones held in waiting hands. They stop people outside the post office, the grocery store, the gas station. Did you know? Did you ever suspect? And most of them answer the same way. Yes, not in full, not in detail. But they had always known something. They had seen the signs, the small things that had not seemed so small after all. But what can be done, they ask, when the man in charge holds the keys to justice itself? For most, the story ends here. A sheriff brought to justice, a town reclaiming its voice, and a brother left to rebuild what was taken from him. But the past is rarely as simple as it seems, and William Tate's downfall was only the beginning. In the weeks that follow his resignation, as investigators pull apart the remains of his tenure, something unexpected surfaces, not in the town records where so many of his misdeeds were erased, not in the sheriff's office where paperwork had a way of vanishing, but in the one place no one thought to look, his personal storage unit, a rusted metal door, a lock old but unbroken, the kind of place people rent and forget about, until now. When authorities arrive, they expect to find the remnants of a former sheriff's career, old uniforms, discarded case files, forgotten evidence logs, but what they uncover is far worse. A box, labeled only with a year, 1998, the year Tate first became sheriff. Inside, the contents are ordinary at first. Paperwork, old notes, files yellowed with time, but beneath them, something else. Photographs, images of crime scenes, some that are well known, some that were never reported. Faces of men and women, some long buried in the town's memory, some that no one remembers at all. Files marked unresolved. Documents signed with his own name, and then one that stands out from the rest. A missing person case. From years ago, a case that had never been solved, a case that had been declared an accident, a case in which William Tate himself had led the investigation. But now, with these photos in hand, it is no longer an accident. Now it is something else. Something that calls for more than just a scandal. Something that calls for more than just a trial. Something that calls for a deeper investigation. And so, even as the town believes it has left the past behind, another door begins to open. Another case long forgotten, now pulled back into the light. And this time the question is not just what William Tate was willing to cover up, but what else he was willing to do. And now I ask you, what do you think? Did William Tate receive the punishment he deserved, or should justice have gone further? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this case as shocking as I did, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Because in the world of true crime, the truth is never as simple as it seems, and there is always another case waiting to be told.